afternoon and evening, everyone. Welcome to the Food System Pavilion. My name is Faiha Askaya Zahira, and I will be your moderator for today. A brief introduction, I am part of the board of the International Forestry Students Association, or IFSA, a well-known organization globally organized and locally operating students organization focusing on connecting our youth as a next generation of leaders. I've traveled a long way to be here, and I believe you have also done that. And we are here now live at COP28 Dubai, discussing on the topic of interest of today, leveraging food security, unleashing the benefits of urban forestry and horticulture on food system transformation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, efforts to overcome hunger and health issues continue to be carried out, especially when the world is faced with a global crisis due to the ever-changing climate. Drought disasters and also extreme weathers has caused massive crops failure, leading to famine and even claiming hundreds of lives. Air pollution has also been responsible for a lot of host of health issues. Thus, diverse mechanisms in addressing food security and climate change must become our main priority. At the same time, it is essential for us to explore these mechanisms by including a range of diverse backgrounds, allowing us to approach this through multidimensional aspects and form a strategic solution together. As we know, forest and horticultural plants hold a vital role in sustaining lives. In addition to their ability to absorb the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, their adversity also provides necessary alternatives to achieve food security and also healthy life, from various organic products of fruits and vegetables to horticultural practices, to urban forests around community ecosystems. So today in this session, we aim to highlight how horticulture and urban forestry management significantly impact lives and the well-being of the people. It will unleash the power of these practices through research-based cases by interconnecting dimensions of forestry and health, all for sustainable and resilient future. Without further ado, I will introduce our amazing panels of today, starting from my left. This is Ms. Paramisha Tapalia. So Ms. Paramisha Tapalia currently serves as the head of youth action and policy at the World Food Forum. She coordinates the youth action and policy track and facilitates the work carried out by independent groups, such as the Youth Policy Board and Young Scientist groups, with passion on agri-food, systems transformation, climate change, and also youth empowerment. She brings experience working with civil society, constituencies, and academic expertise to her role. Next to Ms. Paramisha Tapalia is our Honorable Sir Dr. Cargill Masso. He is the current director of the Consultative Group of International Area Research, or CGIAR's, Impact Area Platform on Environmental Health and Biodiversity. He previously worked for IITA, or the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, in the Program of Natural Resources Management, or NRM, and he is trained in soils and the environment. On our last side of the panel is Ms. Sharda Ramades. Ms. Sharda Ramades is a passionate ecologist or naturalist with a formal training in both technology and ecology. She is experienced working with the International Business Machines Corporation, or the IBM, for over 9 years across system software before moving into ecology. Over the past 15 years, she has worked with NGOs and forest departments in the south of India in the domain of ecology and conservation. Currently, she works with the International Analog Forestry Network as their Asia coordinator on ecological restoration methods for gender-just climate solutions towards building a resilient ecosystem in around communities. Now, I would like to welcome all of our amazing panels once more, and thank you so much for being here with us, ladies, ma'am, and madam. And thank you for wanting to share your experience and expertise in this session with us. We look forward to hear more details in just a few minutes about what your organization or your network has been doing and has been achieved to enhance our food system resilience and transformations. Now, for the awaited moment, I would like to open this discussion with the question of interest of today. Now, ma'am and madam, maybe we can start with the question of regarding your perspective in this topic. Based on your respective research and also experience and backgrounds, how do you perceive horticultural practice and also urban forestry in significantly contributing to enhancing the food security? And in what ways does the integration of urban forestry and horticulture support sustainable resilience food system when we know that we are currently facing the global climate crisis? Maybe we can start with Ms. Parmisha. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you IPSA, ES, and CGIR for inviting World Food Forum to be part of this panel. Talking about World Food Forum, we are a group. We are hosted by Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and we aim to empower youths to transform the agri-food systems. In this role, we work through different tracks, including youth action and policy, innovation, culture, education. We had a World Food Forum flagship event last October, and there we discussed a lot of global policy priorities with young people all across the world. And next year, we're planning to go through the implementation pilot phase. And in this respect, this topic of urban forestry and horticulture comes in the right moment because often urban forestry and horticulture is not discussed in these kind of policy discussions and also in the side events. Specifically talking about horticulture, I think it is really important to speak about fruits and vegetables as well, given that the topic of healthy diets and healthy planet is increasing, and a lot of statistics show that there needs to be increased component of fruits and vegetables in the individual diet, especially in the global south developing countries where there are a lot of marginalized land, where we can use the knowledge and technique of the indigenous and local communities. We can use those marginalized land to grow fruits and fruits specifically, and use those high value crops to increase the country's GDP and also economy as a whole. Also in terms of urban forestry, given that the world, there is increasing rural-urban continuum and increasing rural-urban divide, I think it is important to consider the sustainable forestry practices in the urban settings as well as future agriculture productivity, especially in tropics, depends on services that forests provide, including cooling benefits and rainfall. As well as there is increasing importance to promote the linkage between forestry and agriculture, including agroforestry, which is one of the important strategies to achieve both climate change and mitigation, particularly in dry lands. So this kind of urban forestry and horticulture practices also helps in ecosystem restoration while increasing the food security depending on the specific countries and regions. So I think it's really important to support youth-led projects in different regions which supports urban forestry and horticulture.
Thank you so much, Ms. Paramisha, for the insights for us. I would like to also underline and agree with you regarding how different regions has their own necessities, and also we need to address it based on their context and people-based context in the field as well. Now, let's hear what Mr. Cargill Masto has said to this. So, sir, I'm going to give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity for the organizers, and especially for the leadership of the youth, the future generation. If you want to make a change, if we want to make sure that things works for really climate adaptation, and even for food security, nutrition, and health, we need strong youth engagement. So I'm really very proud to be part of this panel, and it makes me young a bit, feel young, so I'm happy with that. Now, really, I will echo my colleague in terms of what she just said. We know normally that cities are warmer than the rural areas in the same settings. And we need trees to cool the cities. And that is very, very critical. And we all know that globally, really, we are losing a lot of forest. We are losing a lot of green spaces. So whatever we can take advantage of in the urban settings becomes very, very critical for us. And when we think about it, as I was thinking about the topic, I recalled the recent COVID pandemic and how access to food was critical for most of the cities when there was a lot kind of roadblocks to access from, disconnecting the cities to the rural areas. I do believe by then all of us understood the need to make sure that we have rural gardens and we have vegetables and so on. I will not repeat what she just said. If we think about the value of fruit trees, about the value of vegetables for nutrition, that becomes very, very critical. And it helps to connect with nature. Sometimes, if you have not seen something, you don't value it the way it is. And I do believe, especially having the youth really taking the leadership, it's an opportunity. Sometimes I think about agribusiness. Before joining these other programs, I was coordinating a youth in agribusiness. And we see a lot of opportunities having horticulture in the in the cities. It's a business opportunities, and it brings to, I mean, opportunities for gender, for youth, and so on, and particularly with the easy access to agricultural inputs. It's not traveling long distances to access the inputs. It's something that is very critical. But as we think about it, we also have to think about some constraints that we have to face, and especially having the youth as the future policymakers, the next policymakers, if they are not already practicing, it becomes really very critical to start understanding how do we manage our cities, how do we make sure that we have protected areas in the cities as well. That could be dedicated for horticulture, that could be dedicated to forest. I'll pause here, then maybe I'll add something later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Calagamaso, for your amazing insights. I completely agree with you. We can highlight several things, especially regarding the diversity of vegetables and also fruits in adding the nutritions and creating the food resilience that we want. Thank you once again, sir. Now, before we continuing to um, Miss Shrada for her inputs regarding our first question, I would like to welcome our joining two panel of the day, which is Miss Sananin Calvillo and also Mr. Sagar Paudel. I would like to introduce the first one, Mr. Sagar Paudel, from the second of my left. Sagar is an agriculture graduate willing to gain more knowledge in governance, systems, and regulations in order to create an impact in policy making. He gathered experience in the International Association of Students in Agricultural and Related Science as a National Director of IAAS Nepal and a Regional External Relation Coordinator at IAAS Asia Pacific. For the past few years, Sagar has also been advocating for climate change, climate justice, youth inclusions, and also sustainability. And aside from Sagar, also joining with us, Ms. Senanin Cavillo. Ms. Senanin Cavillo is a climate justice activist and indigenous Niua descendant from Puebla, Mexico. She is a community organizer at Legado Gaia or Legaia. She studied Latin American Studies undergraduate student at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, and she is also a plant-based food system advocate at ProVec International Youth Board and a storyteller and Culture Hack Labs fellow. Now, for our amazing speakers, we are continuing on our first question, so I'm going to give the floor to Ms. Sharada to answer the question and give us your insight, please, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this panel, and good day to you all. Yeah, I've taken on from what the other panelists have said. What I would like to take a step aside is to say that at Analog Forestry, or the IAFN, which is the International Network for Analog Forestry, we try to reimagine forestry as it stands today. So we talk about forestry in urban spaces or rural spaces. It's typically known to be tree stands. It's typically known to be monocultures. It's typically known to be timber producing, value addition. And at Analog Forestry, we actually derive the inspiration for forestry from home gardens, from homesteads. The genesis of Analog Forestry lies in home gardens in the small island of Sri Lanka. That's where it was born. The seed was planted by ancestral practices, but what some of our panelists have said, by traditional practices of how one typically manages and nurtures a piece of land around you to your benefit, while also empowering and encouraging the ecosystem to thrive. So at Analog Forestry, we look at the health of the planet and the people. So we look at both ecosystem health and people health. So the founding principles that we base on are things like, do you understand your water? Do you understand your soil? Is your soil fertile? And do you know what plants are going to grow in your place? Do you understand your climate? Do you understand your geography? Do you understand your contours? Because that will define your water management practices. And so that's what we try to, these are the founding principles in which Analog Forestry works on to develop implementations. So we ideally actually talk about creating forests, but we derive our inspiration and derive our knowledge from natural forests. Because that, I mean, all said and done, nature knows best when it comes to creating and managing forests, right? And so that's what Analog Forestry has been doing for well over 20 plus years. Actually, it's even before when the genesis and the experimentation started in California and Sri Lanka, but in the last 20 plus years, from 2000 onwards, we have been across continents from Latin America, Africa, Asia, across multiple geographies, and we are always focused on communities, indigenous communities, gender. We look at either community commons. We also collaborate with government systems if that's available to us, but we are open to, and also knowledge transfer. This is a network. So we believe that our strength lies in sharing this knowledge so that people can actually go ahead and utilize it in their own context. Like you said, context specific. We ask them to drive it context specifically to what suits your needs. A tree, a plant that would serve your need would be different in Africa as opposed to Asia, because the forest types may be different depending on what altitude, what geographical region, eco-geographical region you're in. And those are the aspects that we kind of train people on, and we kind of give awareness to people on. In terms of urban forestry, like we said, we do not differentiate the concept of forestry as an urban or a rural. We say that when you're trying to grow a forest, understand what is its function. What is its structure and its function? As for nature goes, a forest has its own independent structure and function. But when it comes to ecosystem services, from the ME ecosystem services, we derive services from it, from food. That's where food security comes in. We derive services in provisioning, regulating, flood controls, all of that. We derive services in terms of soil health and supporting services. And that's how we look at the forest being beneficial to humans. And that's where I think analog forestry is well positioned to be able to adapt to any landscape. You can do it in a 40 by 40 square foot. You can do it on a hectare of land or multiple hectares of land, and nothing's stopping you on that. I will share an example of the resilience of that. Maybe I'll give time for the other speakers, and I'll share an interesting example of resilience and an testament to how it can work through COVID, which happened in a couple of our sites. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sharada, for sharing that with us. And I completely would like to note regarding how fascinating forest function could be. It's not only how it could only provides for like timber produce and other things, but also how it also affects the cultural and also the resiliency of the local community and the people around it. So in next question, we will try to debunk about what kind of efforts and also projects that each of our respective panelists here has been doing for the past few years in terms of trying to achieve the food system resilience that we are trying to aim here. Now, moving on to the next question. Could you please share us the specific successful initiatives or project that perhaps Ms. Shorada has already mentioned as well, from each of your organization or your network that has been undertaken to leverage urban forestry and or horticulture to promote equitable access to fresh and nutritious food, particularly in perhaps like marginalized areas? Maybe since we previously started from Ms. Parmisha, we could now start from Ms. Shraddha on the right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just start off from where I left. So basically, the example that I wanted to bring to notice here is from Sri Lanka, the northern half of Sri Lanka. We know it's been under civil war strife for a very long time, and the Jaffna area. So there are women out there. Jaffna is a landscape which is more or less dry. It has a short monsoon, and therefore the monsoon season, when you get water availability, is less. And so water has to be planned and managed when you get your water available. So there was a food crisis, or there was an insecurity. I wouldn't say crisis, but insecurity of food for the women out there, and we ran this implementation supported through a partner, Gaga. I should mention that IAFN is a part of the Gaga Alliance, the Global Alliance for Green and Gender Action, and we work on gender empowerment, we work on gender justice and climate justice that is rooted in gender, right, and gender and in indigenous communities and race across the spectrum. So coming back to the point at hand, in north of Jaffna, so we ran this implementation with a couple of women who had a little bit of land in there around their. Most of these small houses do have a little bit of a plot around, like home gardens, a front yard or a backyard. So we ran this with them and tried to understand, okay, what is it that you're not doing that you could do more? You might be growing just a couple of things. Can you do more? Like analog forestry, the reason we mimic natural forest is that natural forest typically has a vertical structure. It's not just a level, which is what monocultures typically degrade a forest to. You just do grasslands, you just do tree stands of the same kind monoculture. That's not how a natural forest is. You will have high, long, tall trees, and understory trees, shrubs. You'll have herbs, you'll have twining climbers, vines. So we try to look at what all will work in their landscapes, and we also try to introduce. So when we say natural forest, we don't say that you have to just recreate a wild forest in your land. We say that you can actually replace a wild forest species with a horticultural species, with a food providing species that works for you, that works for your economic benefit. It can be sustenance, it can be just self-sustenance, or you could reap through harvest, right? So this was done for a year, and it was just before COVID and 2020. And when COVID came in, it was interestingly found that these women found it extremely resilient to be able to handle the COVID situation under those conditions of your blockages, and there was no access to food across the country. And surprisingly, the women actually didn't find it difficult to manage. And that was a very simple proof of what just 1 year or 2 years of this could do. And if you can sustain it for the long haul, I mean, that's where this is headed to. It's food security for the community. That's what I wanted to share from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Sharada, for informing and sharing this with us. Next, let's hear the inputs from Ms. Sananin. So I'm giving the floor to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for also the space to share about the projects that we have been leading in Mexico in Legado Gaia, which is a youth organization, and how we also have managed to sort of leverage all these barriers that youth and specifically like marginalized people in the cities have to not be able to replicate family horticulture that often happens in like rural areas. And it is like land ownership, the first barrier that we had to overcome. And we sort of made an agreement with the municipality of Mexico City to have some space in the Popotla neighborhood to create this community urban garden that allowed us to not only bring us all together, like in youth and the elders in the neighborhood, but to actually replicate all these traditional ways of producing food and to replicate horticulture. That is the milpa in Mexico, which is like a Mesoamerican ancient way of leveraging the environmental needs and the nutritional needs of people. And the milpa is a agroecological system that involves different species that are the base of the nutrition and food of Mesoamerican civilization since 10,500 years. And yeah, it is based on corn, on chili, on squash and their leaves, and on tomatoes as well. So yeah, it is a producing way that has allowed for many years to sort of do not leave people like on the unnutritional sides of the or like normal and modern diet that now exists. So yeah, it is a way that we have tried to overcome like insecurity of food and try to overcome as well the disintegration of urban spaces, because oftentimes in Mexico and in the climate movement, it's often believed that only the forests that are like far away are the only ones that we need to protect, but actually the forest and the forestry that happens in the cities are also a territory to defend. So that is something that we have learned over this path, and yeah, we wanted to share it with you all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sananin, for the sharing. And I think it's very interesting to see how we can actually utilize forest spaces and also urban spaces to maximize the diversification of the species itself for like foods and fruits and vegetables and others. Now, I'm interested to hear what Mr. Dr. Cargill has said to this, so I'm going to give the floor to you, sir.
Thank you very much. For the moment, I will try to insist a bit on the horticulture aspects, and this being really an event of youth, talking about my experience in Cameroon with youth and horticulture in urban cities. And two aspects which are really very critical. First of all, how do we make sure that we, the youth, interact also with the policymakers in some of the areas, especially when we grow crops in cities and we want to cut on the cost of production. What do you think about the potential resources, local assets we can take advantage of? Most of it will be recycling, the organic waste in the cities. How do we work with compost? How do we build the capacity of the youth to make sure that we can be able to generate this kind of inputs so that we can minimize the cost of production? The other, it was a project of youth in agribusiness. The other aspects really, especially in our African context, where the storage conditions are not really easy because of minimum access to energy, we need to rethink about different ways of conserving, extending the shelf life of the vegetables. And the project was building the capacity of the youth in terms of expanding the shelf life of the vegetable, solar dryers, and so on, so that we can be able to extend. And then try to really negotiate the markets, try to see how do we work with the different government programs so that we can be able to create the markets. The other aspects really is also trying to make sure that each drop of water counts in the cities. How do we use the wastewater of the kitchen also to water the vegetables? I like the point in terms of we don't need big lands to do it. You just need 1 by 1 meter, and you can still grow a few vegetables, especially with the story approach, where you can have different layers of vegetables. How to build the capacity? After all, it takes enough energy, and this is really good news because most of this event is organized by the youth who are at university or has already completed university. How do we make sure that we take the advantage of the knowledge the youth has, also to build the capacity of the other youth in the cities who have not gotten the same opportunities to go to school and learn how to do it? Then we can create a value chain of the horticulture. I'll pause here for now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cargill, for your comments. I also would like to highlight two things that we need to consider regarding this products, which is we need to ensure about the market itself and also the utilization of space. For example, as what Dr. Cargill has given an example is in the urban spaces. Now, let's hear the perspective from youth, both from Sagar So, Sagar, I will give the floor to you to maybe share your perspective or any projects or initiatives that you have done successfully in achieving the food system transformation.
Okay, so thank you so much. So I was the part of IAS, which is one of the biggest student association in the world. It means International Association of Students in Agriculture and Related Sciences. So last year I was the part of VCP coordinator. So during that chance, I got a chance to explore different projects around the world, and I will be specifically talking about the two different types of project of agroforestry, which is related with the food system. So first one is in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. So we have Maleb Agri Farm. In that farm, the youth, they just initiated that farm as an agroforestry model in which they try to incorporate different indigenous crop along with the horticultural crops like banana, papaya, and the cassava. So these three complete set of the production are being used in Malib Agri Farm, and they were preparing the saplings, they were selling those saplings and generate the local economy. So this is the one case, and next is the scenario of Nigeria. So I will be talking about the project name 1000 New Tree Yearly Campaign, and it was launched in Embrada State, Nigeria, where the different peoples in the schools, they were trained about growing the trees, and they were learned about the importance of tree. As they have been studied about the trees are the lungs of the planet, so we have to promote them. And in that narratives, the project is quite successful. In that way, I will talking about the two different horticulture and agroforestry combination project initiated by IAS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagar. Ms. Paramisha?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Youth-led projects operate with very minimal resources, but often we see that in the community level, they have a more impact than the projects that are done by established organizations sometimes. So as I already said, World Food Forum is a network of networks, and we support youth organizations through our different tracks. And one of the projects that we have within our innovation track is Youth Food Lab. Given this theme, there is one project called Bees and Trees in Uganda, where young people in the rural region of the Uganda, they are combining bee cultivation, like bee raising, like having them as a pollinator for the horticultural crops and other tree species, and empowering local women and marginalized communities to support that project, so that the products from those farms could be used to generate the income for those communities as well. And another project that I really liked, it is not related to my organization, but I'm from Nepal, and during COVID, there was a project initiated by some young agriculture graduates. So the name of the project is Star Organics Nepal, and in the urban level in the city, especially in the Kathmandu, they had vertical farms where using the water hydroponic system, they cultivated different vegetables, especially spinach and other short-term vegetables, and they used those products to deliver to the market, to the household. So that was one of the projects that started in COVID time, and they're still continuing it and making income out of it. So this kind of youth-led examples from all across the world also shows the stories of resilient and how these smaller projects initiated by youths with limited resources can also make an impact in the long run.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. Paramisha, for that comment. Before we move on to the more specific question, ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed how different regions, different locations, and also different contexts has bring us a variety of scenarios within the field. And a lot of things, projects, initiatives, and also mechanism has been carried out to achieve the sustainability of food system, and also to maximize the urban forest within different area itself. So I hope this could add several points to our final discussion later. But now moving on to the more specific things, maybe as we have lots of representatives of amazing panels here, I would like to explore more regarding the topic, maybe starting from Miss Pramisha and also Mr. Sagar from the youth representatives. Firstly, can you discuss any policy changes or barriers that currently exist in promoting the benefits of horticulture, especially because your background maybe focuses on that, for food system transformation? And what recommendations do you have in overcoming those challenges, if I may know? Maybe you could start.
Thank you for the questions, and I would speak about overall barriers for the youth-led projects, and specifically there was also, we also some of the panelists also talk about land tenure and land rights. I think access to land is one of the major barriers for young people, especially in different countries, including Global South countries, and also a lack of access to finance and infrastructures is another greatest barriers for youth-led projects and initiatives. Similarly, young people also need capacity building and access to technology to continue their projects in the long run. Having said that, involvement of women, especially women from the community level, is actually very important to have any project run for a longer term. Also, we tend to explain the things through urban-rural divide, but since rural regions is actually converting to urban, and it is not going to stop, so I think we need to look everything to the perspective of rural-urban continuum, then rural-urban divide as well. So these youth-led projects, if government can give some incentives, can make some policy more accessible in terms of accessing the loans or decreasing the interest rate to access the loans for investment in their projects. So finance and capacity building, I would say, is the top barriers that young people are facing, not only in the projects related to urban forestry and horticulture, but also in the overall projects as overall areas as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Sagar?
Okay, so thank you so much. So my answer also resembles most with the previous speaker, as being the youth, as leading different projects and initiatives. So we are always facing the barrier of our voices. So we have different organization, independent organization like FI, Food and Agriculture Youth Institute. We have different position paper. We just present those paper with the concern of the authorities about different project, but our voice are not heard. So that's the reluctancy to set different project, works in different project, and supporting different youth-led project. And if they are heard, then their continuation, that's the major aspect. Then some organization came, they just give seed money. So we just initiate that project, and what about after the 1 year or 2 years? So the project, the incubation or the idea, it ultimately fails. So we are not getting that continuous support. So we want continuous support in terms of capacity building, financial resources, or supporting those idea or collaboration with other organization, maybe public-private partnership or anything. So that's the first thing. And second is the land use planning system, as our previous speaker has always mentioned about the access of land and the planning system, the land use planning, where we have to go for road, where we have to make for urban forestry, where we have to go for agricultural land and livestock. So that's the another barrier I was talking about. And the third one is the approach for the decision maker. Always they decide from the top without analyzing the ground situation. So we have to analyze all those things from the bottom to top approach, and we need to identify our things on basis of the need assessment. So that's the major things what we are facing while launching the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sagar, on that comment. It is very interesting, and if I may recall of what Ms. Parmisha and Mr. Sagar has explained before, the main issues and also challenges for youth is mainly accessibility of finance and also capacity building, and it needs to be done sustainability. And other thing, it will be barrier in giving our voices, and we have perhaps here a lot of issues and challenges within the field. Now, moving on to the next question, still for Ms. Parmisha and also Ms. Sagar, in your opinion, what does youth role play in maximizing the impact of perhaps horticulture and food system transformation, since we have lots of challenges before, right? Maybe we could try to start with Mr. Sagar first.
Okay, sure. So thank you so much for the question. The role of youth in the transformation or in those sector is very precise. So talking about the first point, so youth can act as a mobilizer, community mobilizer. They can involve in awareness among the people. They can involve in different climate action. So they can share their idea with the other person. So after they learn, after they share those idea, then it can be executed in the different form. That's the first point. And second point is we, although we are restricted in terms of advocacy, in terms of policy changes, so our voice need to be heard. Our idea, our innovation, they need to be incubated to give the certain direction or better direction. So that's the second part what youth can play. And next is youth-led implementation, different youth-led implementation. As I have talked about the IS, different youth-led project in the IS, those implementation, those activities, they need to preserve and they need to be made sustainable in the longer run. And our approach, they need to be supported in the bigger platform. So that's all from my side.
Yes, Ms. Parmisha. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll just touch on one point. So the main role youth can play for to achieve these goals is to engage stakeholders mainly. So if young people could bring government, public sector, private sector, and community leaders together, so that will help to make their youth-led projects successful. And I think that is the greatest role youth can play. For example, I will give an example. There is a community forest initiative in Nepal, and community forest led by women is particularly quite successful. So I think the youth can replicate those sorts of best practices and mobilize the women of the communities, mobilize the marginalized communities, indigenous peoples in the communities, and bring them in the table right from the planning of their ideas to execution as well. So bringing stakeholders all together is the greatest role youth can play today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parmisha. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the voice of youth. Now we're going to move on to Mr. Cargill from CGIAR. Perhaps continuing to what you have commented before, sir. Within urban forestry planning, as we are all aware, an emerging focus is on broadening the biodiversity, right? To integrating edible tree species to not only enhance the aesthetics of urban landscape, perhaps, but also to contribute significantly to community resilience and security. Can you please elaborate for us on how to deliberate this inclusion of edible tree species in urban forestry plans can positively impact community well-being and address concerns related to food security, sir?
Thank you. Before I answer that one, I will take you back a bit on policy aspects. There is one thing that is interesting. Two persons were traveling together, and one was taking photos of the buildings, and the other one was asking him why you are taking the photos. And he said, really, these buildings are very beautiful. And the other one said, we see them on daily basis. What is really new? The other one said, probably you don't know what is really my situation. Then they traveled to another area, and the other one was taking photos of trees all the time. And the other said, how come you are taking photos of trees? We see them on daily basis. He said, no, you have seen my place. There is almost no trees. It's only buildings. So the first thing to be serious on this note is we need something in terms of the policies to make sure that we have green spaces in the cities. Before we have the green spaces, everything we are talking about may be very difficult to materialize. That is the first one. The second, I think, really the beauty of the nature is in the biodiversity, is the diversity we have. And we know majority of the cities, we have only exotic trees. For beauty, they look beautiful, it's easy. Sometimes they even smell very well. But they don't feed the people. And I was referring to the case of COVID with the issues we had in connecting the rural areas to the cities and difficult to access food, including fruits. And anyone who has any city that had enough fruit trees in that city, probably they saw the difference it could make. Now it's really, we talk about nutrition, this is the food systems pavilion. We need to diversify in terms of the food. And this goes also in the need for capacity building, for people to understand what do we eat, why do we eat it. Sometimes we really need to talk to each other to understand. Then you will know, I need this kind of fruit because of ABC. Once you have a good understanding of it, the likelihood that you are going to promote it increases. So there is a need of education, capacity building, awareness creation to make sure that we get to what we want. Secondly, we are talking about climate adaptation, climate change, and so on. And we know my colleague here was referring to the exotic forest we are having. When you have one species in the forest, just imagine in case of a specific disease targeting that kind of trees. You lose all the forest. But if we had diversity, probably it was going to be a significant difference. This is the kind of principle we need to bring in for people to understand why we need to diversify, because all the trees are not sensitive to the same climate parameters, and that has to be taken into consideration. I'll pause here for now.
Thank you, Dr. Cargill, for the comments and elaboration. Maybe next one we can move on to Ms. Sananin. In your perspective, while we examine the intricate interplay between traditional ecological knowledge, perhaps, and urban forestry practices, how does traditional ecological knowledge influence and guide the development of sustainable urban forestry practices for indigenous communities?
Yes, thank you for the question as well. I think I can also like dive deeper into what I said before, that in the projects that we have led in Mexico and in the hopes that we have as well, are that we can recover and yeah, like sort of remember as well the traditional knowledge in our communities, because a lot of us in Mexico City are from indigenous communities and we have migrated. So we have all this knowledge with us. And something that we have been relearning is that, and that also shapes the way in which we do forestry and the projects that we have on agriculture, is that in traditional Mesoamerica, the base of civilization has been plants, seeds, roots, and right now we are facing all these effects of factory farming, of climate change in our territories. And it's something that we have seen, and that now, after reevaluating the way that we used to eat in Mesoamerica, we are trying to then base these projects that we have on the ancestral diets, on the plant-based diets that in Mesoamerica were predominant. And yeah, I believe that in also recovering all these in traditional ways in which the land was worked, we also can achieve then restoration of urban environments. And yeah, that is why we are also trying to right now create this compendium of both techniques on agriculture and of traditional like recipes as well, to create with these things that are harvested and are also like recollected in the area. So yeah, now as the representative of the World Forum, Premisha, said, yeah, we are then now facing these barriers, right, on access to support, on access to stakeholders and partners to like uplift our work and try to also not only stay in the center of Mesoamerica and on the knowledge that is in there, but also to try to like move it forward on Latin America, on North America. And yeah, I really believe that it is important that all this knowledge that the traditional communities hold and that now are being like lost or losing like in the modern society, like the importance, we need to recover all those. So yeah, I do believe that it is important that we all get together and we can like uplift all this knowledge.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sanani, for the elaboration on that. And my last question would be to Ms. Sharada. In your opinion, how can urban forestry and horticulture initiative be designed and implemented to ensure inclusivity and address the diverse needs of communities? And what role does inclusivity has here in like achieving the food system resilience.
Sure. Before we come to the human inclusivity, I would go pan and say I'm looking at inclusivity from a nature, earth systems to the human food security point of view. Because as we keep saying with analog forestry, we look at, it's already been pointed out that biomass, today forestry is about biomass, right? You calculate everything by carbon and biomass. But biomass isn't the only aspect of forestry. You have to look at biodiversity because there is a balance of biomass to biodiversity is what enables a certain kind of stability and resilience as we speak in ecological terms. And you have to remember that only if the health of the forest that you're building is good, can you expect it to give you healthy foods or for consumption and therefore improving your health and food security. So our food sovereignty and security lies in us ensuring that we take care of the land on which we grow forests, right? And the interesting thing in terms of doing this with the youth and in urban spaces is that, like Yanin also pointed out, the traditional knowledge of some of this is very simple yet significant. Like when you look at the diversity of foods, it's not just diversity in the physical terms of plant diversity, okay? It's diversity in terms of faunal diversity because different species have different pollinators, different species have different dispersers, different species have different pests, like how Dr. Kagil was talking about the infestation that goes on a monoculture. So the moment you kind of introduce a diversity in plant, you automatically introduce a diversity in the food web. You automatically introduce an integrated pest management system that's biological. Also, we derive inspiration from nature in the sense that a natural forest doesn't work on extensive inputs from outside. You're not pumping in nitrogen and phosphates like a traditional agriculture or system that we are recommending nowadays to do, right? It's a self-healing system. It's a self-sustaining system. It's a self-recycling system. And that's what we endeavor to kind of promote in urban spaces also, like the composting aspects and trying to derive it on that front. And in terms of urban spaces, again, another important thing where I think urban forestry holds significant importance is as biological corridors. We look at them as fragments, and you think that they are not very useful because they are fragments, but they're actually very important biological corridors. Most of the time, species like insects that are pollinators or any of those invertebrates actually use those corridors to move about. And so if you can ensure the population to be stable in your vicinity, you ensure your lifestyle to be stable. So I think that kind of sums it up in terms of what I would like to share. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sharda, for the last comment on today's session. And now we still have a little bit time, so if you guys would like to have any questions, that would be the right time to ask. Yes, please, ma'am.
Thank you so much for a very rich and very varied responses and comments that you have made. I'd like to ask one question that really interests me. This is about the traditional knowledge and traditional practices. You talked about how you're trying to ensure that you monitor and you record in the Mesoamerica. But how can you ensure that you keep this knowledge, that it adapts to time, and that it's used also by others? Because when we talk about knowledge and science, we talk very much about data in the form of numbers and numbers you can keep. When I go to the field and I listen to knowledge, it's in the story of history and culture. And so it's very difficult to get metrics to measure it and also how to record it. I would like to hear from you about this.
Yep, thank you so much, ma'am. Maybe for Ms. Sananin, would like to answer regarding that?
Yes, well, in our experiences, what we have tried to do as well is that first in communities, like oral like tradition and like transmitting knowledge through like oral stories is a way in which like we can learn from the elders and we can pass the information on to children. But also we have, as I said, now in indigenous communities now also have resorted to like writing and like preserving all this knowledge in books. That is why we also want to create this book. And yeah, I believe that the other possibility and that we can still like all of us think deeper on is to like connect with innovation, like digital innovation as well, because in my community at least a huge way in which we can share all this information with the world has been like through social media as well. So it is, I think, I believe, a way in which we can use communications and other source of information of digital innovation to uplift all this knowledge and not let it to be just in a place and just be like forgotten. But yeah, I do believe that there are many possibilities that we can still explore. But yeah, I think that again we need like different stakeholders to support each other.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ananin, for the answer. And ladies and gentlemen, that would conclude our session of the day. We have heard a lot of different stories, a lot of different backgrounds, and also challenges, the opportunities that we have in the food security through horticultural practices and also urban forestry. Hopefully, this could add our insights regarding the topic. And thank you so much once again to all of our speakers. Please give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. So to conclude this session, I would like to say thank you once again to all participants. IFIHA here would like to check out and see you on other opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you.